Hey Exoticals, welcome to the social climbing series. By the way, if you're new to this channel, the Exoticals are my core audience. So this channel is made for multiracial Black women. When I say multiracial Black, I'm talking about anybody who's anywhere from 25 to 75% Black. If you're monoracial and you are light skinned, or maybe you have light eyes or something, you're benefiting from colorism, texturism, or featureism, this channel also caters to you as well because I talk about our unique experiences on here. Be sure to check out my What is an Exotical series if you're new, and then don't forget to join the members page or the Patreon if you want Discord access. But I feel like as Exoticals, we have a very unique experience, and I think that it's really good that we have our own little community so we can like kind of talk about what it's like being in a small town versus a big city. By the way, this is not created to make a hierarchy. I don't think one is better than the other. I think that you should always follow your intuition. This is not an advice channel, so I'm not going to tell you guys what to do. But I can talk about some of my experiences. So, number one, the benefit of being in a small town. I feel like I really stood out a lot more when I was in a small town. So I grew up in a small town. I feel like it's very easy to stand out because there are just less people. There's kind of like less competition in terms of getting jobs. There are less people applying for jobs. There are less people applying for opportunities. So I feel like it's very easy to come in and kind of dominate if you're in a smaller area. That's why we see a lot of exoticals thriving in places like Louisiana. Like the Creole community was there. If you look at what it was like in the early 1800s and 1900s, you had the Creoles building their whole entire community. You see a lot of Dominican and Caribbean exoticals in the suburbs of New York City, kind of making a life for themselves, kind of the smaller towns outside of New York. You see those types of women making a name for themselves. So I feel like sometimes when it's smaller, it is easier to get things done. Another benefit that I had growing up was, oh, by the way, in my small town, this is not a poor small town because I saw some people commenting saying, like, oh, well, you're more likely to face violence in a small town. Well, I didn't grow up in a small, it wasn't like a small ghetto. I think that socioeconomic status also matters. So if you are in a small town, obviously, I want the exoticals to be in nicer areas. You've never heard me recommend going to the ghetto or like living in the ghetto. I actually talked about my experiences living in the ghetto before as an adult, kind of like by choice. But I feel like one thing I liked about growing up in a small town was the pace of life is slower. You have more time to think. I can hear myself think when I'm in a small town. When I'm in the big city, even sitting in my apartment, I hear cars outside, people are honking, I can hear people talking, I can hear music bumping and stuff. But whenever I'm in a small city, it's so quiet. Like I can go to the park and I can just sit at a bench. Nobody's going to come up and beg me for money. Nobody's going to come up and harass me or try to talk to me because it's small, like nobody's there. So I feel like there's a sense of privacy. It's less crowded in general. So when I'm in a public place, I don't feel as on guard or on alert like how I do in a big city. So even when it comes to like public transportation, when I lived in a big city, I felt like just walking down the street, I really had to watch my back. I would hate it if I forgot my earphones because then I'm fucked because, now somebody's going to try to talk to me on the train. They're going to talk to me on the subway. But in a small town, I felt like I could just walk anywhere. If I needed to take the bus, there's not going to really be anybody on the bus. There might be one or two people on the bus. Even taking plane rides, like going to the airport. So it does suck sometimes having to drive really far to get to the airport, but sometimes going on flights and then flying to a super small, tiny city, nobody's going on that flight. So I loved being on the plane and being able to stretch out my feet because my entire aisle had nobody sitting on it. Another thing about small towns is I felt like when I was in a small town, I had more time to study and read and kind of like research things. I felt like I was a better planner when I lived in a smaller town. versus a big city. I feel like things can change very easily. You have to wing it a lot when you're in a big city. You have to think on your feet. But when I was in a small town, I remember having planners. I had like calendars and like I would just sit there and write out a to do list. I was so much more organized and I could stick to my plan a lot easier because there are less distractions. So I think that's an advantage for Exoticals. There are less distractions when you're in a smaller city. Also, I feel like even though you have haters, your haters don't really have very much power because it's like, what are they really going to do? Okay, I've got some haters in Fargo, North Dakota. What are those girls going to do to me? What are they going to stop my bags? Are they going to stop me from going to college? Are they going to stop me from getting a job? Probably not. So I think that's another thing too is I didn't feel like there were as many power structures or powerful people working against me when I was in a smaller city. I didn't really feel that way. People couldn't sabotage me very easily in a small city because there's really, first of all, there's not very much to sabotage. And I also felt like, in terms of money, well, it kind of depends. So, in terms of money, when I was in a smaller town, just like not going out as much, I mean, my savings was looking beautiful. I could just stack up just thousands of dollars within a year because there was nowhere to go. I wasn't going out. I would say the most expensive thing I was doing in a smaller town was probably going to a coffee shop or maybe getting a burger here and there. But in a small town, I feel like the money saving ability is just unmatched. So if you're an exotical, that's something you can do. You can save your money. Like in my case, when I was in a small town, I got to spend like $600. I remember one time I spent $600 on a whole bunch of hair appliances. Now, was that smart? No, not really. I mean, I was in my 20s, so I would spend money on like, the hooded dryers and like all the different rollers and flexi rods and all that. So I also had a lot more time to do my beauty hobbies. I think that's a good thing for Exoticals because we are known for our beauty. That's a part of our collective image. We are known for being beautiful. I love when I go to a smaller place and I see all these exoticals with like long, pretty hair, super healthy skin, like super pretty nails and toes and everything. They do their DIY stuff, or they just drink like herbs and stuff because they're just a country girl, or they just they have more time to do their beauty hobbies. So that was another thing I loved about being in a small town. Oh, by the way, I forgot to say my definition of small or mid-size. I'm going to put small and mid-size cities in the same category. And then when I say a big city, what I mean is like your city is famous. So, maybe people come to your city for tourism, like Miami or New York or something like that. But when I was in the smaller cities, I loved doing all my DIY stuff. I had time to do the things on my calendar. Like I told you guys, on Saturdays from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m., I was on my shit. I was working on something. I would be cleaning, organizing, meal prepping. I could spend like 3 hours making all these different meals. I got to experiment with like the slow cooker, and I just had a totally different mindset when I was in a smaller city because there just wasn't as much pulling at my attention. In a big city, I feel like there is a little bit more of a distraction, especially if you live in kind of like the party area. You can hear music outside, you can smell the barbecue. Like this literally happens to me in a big city. I'll walk by and smell like barbecue, or I turn to the left and then there's a new food truck. And then next thing I know, I'm at the food truck. I was supposed to be saving that extra $20. That was supposed to go towards my vacation. But now, because there's a food truck right there's a food truck outside my window and it just smells so good. Now I'm more tempted to like purchase that or whatever. So I think one of the advantages of a small town is there are just less distractions. And then in terms of dating, I do think that there's a difference. By the way, this is a decentering men channel, so I'm never going to tell you to go out and date. I'm not going to encourage you to get married and have kids or whatever. Some of you guys want to date, some of you guys don't. But looking back on my experience, I did notice that there are kind of like less options. There are less people, so there are less options. There's a little bit less variety because it's a smaller city. But then when you do date, the guys, they're more likely to kind of latch on to you. So I think if you want marriage or something, that makes more sense. But if you don't, then it's kind of like, oh shit. So when I look back at my experiences, I think the guys were more long term oriented when I was in a smaller city because that's all there is to do. That's more of the culture there. The culture is you have kids, you get married, you have kids, you purchase a house, you go shopping, and then you buy boats, and then you take your boat out, or you buy camping equipment and you go camping with your tents and all that. And that was kind of, that's kind of how my hometown was. So there's more of a shopping culture as well. I would say it's more like, I'm not going to call it materialistic, but shopping is more of a hobby in my small town because they don't have a lot of like festivals and parades and all that. So a lot of the people on Saturdays, they're just going to go over to TJ Maxx. They're going to go over to the mall. They're going to drive out to the mall. They're going to drive out and get lunch at the food court at the mall. So shopping is considered more of an event. And like whenever I'm in a small town, I see a lot more people wearing name brands versus if I'm in like New York City or something. People are just wearing anything. If I go to a big city, you can really just wear anything and it's not a big deal. But in my small towns that I've been in, it's more so like people have their name brands that they really like, whether it's North Face, Patagonia. What's that one? Canada, whatever it's called with like the red label. Okay, it's Canada Goose. I just looked it up. So, whatever small town you're from, if it's more of an affluent small town, they probably have their favorite brands, or like Hunter rain boots, UGG boots. I don't know. There are just so many name brands. A lot of the name brands that I used to love when I was younger, I feel like part of that just came from me being from a small town. And I think part of it is your geographical location as well. So you guys can also comment down below, like what name brands did a lot of people like in your small town? Because I feel like every small town has a certain name brand and they just love whatever that is. Also, when I was in a small town, there was more of an emphasis on driving a nice car for whatever reason. I just feel like, in my experience, being in affluent small towns, they're not really in survival mode as much. And if they are, they're more community oriented. So it's like there's a focus on creating a family. And so then, like, they'll get married, they have kids, then they purchase like a RAV4 or like a Suburban or whatever the name brand car is, like a Tesla, actually. That's probably the average in my hometown. But I saw somebody commented, they were like, oh, small town, that means that the people are going to be smaller minded. So I don't necessarily think that's the case. Some of the biggest icons and some of the most creative people that we've ever seen have actually come from smaller places. People like Michael Jackson, people like Oprah, Steve Jobs is popping up in my head, Walt Disney, John D. Rockefeller, Henry Ford. So there are a lot of people who achieve things in life that come from small towns. So I don't want the exoticals to have this mindset that if you're from a small town, then like you're fucked. No, that's an inferiority complex. I think that different things work for different people. Like in my case, I love where I'm from. I'm from a small town myself. I wouldn't change it for the world. I like that I come from a place that's very special and unique. And it's always a conversation starter. Like if I'm in a big city and they're like, oh, where are you from? And then I tell them my exact town, they're like, oh, I've never heard of that. So I feel like in my case, my small town kind of gets exotified. I am not from a popular black city either. So in my case, a lot of people in the white community actually are familiar with my hometown. So they'll be like, oh my God. So I think everybody has pros and cons. I just want the exoticals to do what works for them. Sometimes you need to move to a small town for a little bit. Some people do better in a small town. As a matter of fact, if you look at Coach Anwar, he is a black dating coach who I do not like. I don't like his advice. But he is trying to tell unambiguous women right now to go move to small towns in Maryland because there's less competition or whatever. There's less dating competition. The women there are not as pretty. So, like, you should move to PG County, Maryland, and then you're more likely to get a guy or whatever. So, a lot of people, they're being strategic with the places that they move to. And generally speaking, if I see people talking shit, they'll be like, oh, don't move to XYZ place. It's like, well, yeah, you can't move to that place because your life is going to suck if you move there. So I try not to take advice from women who I wouldn't trade lives with. So I want you to think about the woman who has the dustiest life you know of. Of course, she's going to tell you not to move. And by the way, there is a such thing as geographical privilege. So, for example, in my case, I would say the disadvantage of my hometown is obviously I didn't want to live there. I happened to want to be a city girl. That was always how I perceived myself. But I think that the advantage of where I came from is I didn't grow up with an inferiority complex. I didn't grow up around a colorist, texturist, or futurist family. I didn't have a framework for that because there were really no people of color at all to compare. There is nobody whose skin color is anywhere near yours to even compare unless you're basing it on white people. So there are pros and cons to every lifestyle. And I think the Exoticals, I'm glad that we have our own space on the internet because I don't want to listen to women who have inferiority complexes trying to tell me that I can't go to Miami. And by the way, it's really pissing me off, all the Miami hate. Bitch, you will never make me hate Miami. I wish somebody would. You know what? Don't go to Miami. Get your ass out. Please leave. We don't need you in Miami. Please move away. Please go back to your home state because I see a lot of people saying, oh, Miami is ratchet. No, you hang out in the ratchet areas of Miami. Your friends and family are ratchet. Your boyfriend's ratchet. Everybody that you're around is dusty and ratchet. So don't try to blame the entire city. No, that's you. There's a good and a bad side to every city. There's a good and a bad side to every town. There's always going to be the poor side and the rich side. So if somebody is calling your city ratchet or ghetto, all they're doing is they're revealing what side of the city they hang out in. So like with Chicago too, they're like, "Oh, Chicago's ratchet, Chicago's ghetto." No, there's a good side of Chicago and there's a ratchet side. But I feel like one of the advantages of smaller towns too is the lower cost of living. So, maybe you want to live in California, but you can't afford to live in like Beverly Hills. So maybe you move over to some other town and it's small and it's maybe like 90 minutes away or something. I don't know, it's 2 hours away, but it's more affordable for you. So that's another thing to think about. If you could live anywhere in the world right now, where would you live and why? Why do you want to move to that place? If you could vacation, the places where you vacation to, that actually is going to give you a clue as to where you would want to live. Like, why do you keep vacationing to the beach? Well, maybe deep down inside, you want to live by the water. Maybe you've always wanted to live by the waterfront. Maybe you like seeing the ocean when you wake up or whatever. So, part of how I decided where to move is I thought about like the jobs that I wanted. What kind of job do I want? What kind of lifestyle do I want? What cost of living do I want? At the time, I was dating, so I was thinking, where do I feel like my type is? That's not a good reason to move, though. I did not move just for that. And again, that was before I decentered men, so I'm not telling you to do that. But I do like to think about this stuff, though, before I leave because all of the dustishas on the internet, they complain about every city. Like, seriously, just go and Google, go look up on TikTok, living in New York as a black woman. I guarantee you're going to see somebody with an inferiority complex. She's going to say, oh, New York is racist. Oh, well, Miami's colorist. Oh, well, LA is colorist. They only like Latinas in LA. Oh, well, don't go to Minnesota. Oh, well, there are no black people there. Oh, well, don't go to Fargo, North Dakota, because there are no black people there. But then you can't go to Atlanta because that's too many black people. And it's like, everywhere the Dustisha goes, dust follows her because that's what she is. She's a dust ball. She's just a ball of dust. Her mindset is dust. She travels from ashes to ashes and dust to dust. Have you noticed that like everywhere Dustisha goes, there's always drama. There's always a problem. It's like, Dustisha, how did you move to the smallest city in the United States and you still found something to complain about? You still found somebody to beef with. There's nobody in the city that you live in. There are only 200 people in that city, and you still found some conflict. So a Dustisha, she's always looking for conflict, and I notice that Dustishas are always seeking validation from racist and colorist people. They're so obsessed with like who's the color, what are colorist people doing? Well, what are the racist white people doing? Oh, okay, well they go to the Cactus Club or whatever in Miami. So okay, well they're all racist and colorist, so I can't go there. They literally ban themselves and like imprison themselves. They're trapped in their dusty apartments. They're trapped in their shacks living with rats and roaches. They can never go anywhere. So the biggest thing I learned is to do the exact opposite of whatever the Dustisha is doing. And by the way, have you ever noticed that when you look at Dustishas on TikTok, whenever they talk about how Miami is so horrible, New York is bad, Chicago is bad, they never tell you what part they live in. Of course they're not, because then they would be exposing that they live in the ghetto. So they don't want to expose that. They're just going to blame the entire city of Miami. They're not going to tell you that they actually live in the most dangerous neighborhood there. No, because if they lived in a nice area in that city, then they wouldn't be complaining. If they lived in a peaceful small town, they wouldn't be complaining. It's only the people that live in the dusty small towns, or they live in the dusty part of the big city. Those are the ones who have the worst things to say. So that's why, as an exotical, I always talk about living in a nice area because you're the pretty girl. You are the standard of living, you're the standard of the soft life. And so, that's all we know how to do as exoticals is live the soft life. Exoticals are not meant to struggle. Other people feel like they are born to struggle, and that's fine. And people brag about struggling. They brag about how they came from the gutter and they built from the ground up. And, they love bragging about like all of the struggles they came from. They love creating a victim Olympics. But the exoticals, you're not made for that. You are a princess. You are designed to be pampered. And so, wherever you want to pamper yourself, whether it's a small city, somewhere mid-size, or somewhere big, that's up to you. And by the way, the reason I put the mid-size cities in with the small cities is because I kind of felt the same. I feel that same small town feeling, even if I'm in a mid-size city. So kind of like Nashville is a good example of like mid-size. I still feel that same feeling of I'm hyper visible. So when you're in a small town, you're more visible, or at least that's how I felt. I felt more visible, and I think that can be good. Some of you guys want visibility. Some of you guys love visibility. In my case, I'm an anonymous YouTuber. I don't show myself on here. I am not like seeking a spotlight per se. So I don't really I don't thrive on visibility. I'm not necessarily seeking that. And so when I was in a small town, I kind of didn't like it when people were looking at everything I did. I didn't like that people knew who I was talking to, who I'm dating. They memorized the car that I drive. They could see my car. They'd be like, "Oh, I saw Exoticals United parked outside of XYZ. She went there on Saturday." Or, like it was like I'm so visible. It's kind of like the downside of a celebrity treatment where you have people kind of invading your privacy. I felt like one of the cons of me living in a small city was people they do kind of gossip about you more. You're the talk of the town, because there's not much to do. There's not much going on. A lot of the people they're not really building stuff as much because a lot of the people are retired. They're already retired or their husband passed away. They're living off of their husband's like inheritance or whatever. So they're not necessarily busy. They're just not as busy in my small town versus when I lived in a big city. So I kind of felt like hyper visible. I felt like people they were monitoring me a little bit more. It's almost like a monitoring spirit vibe, but I felt it more in person when I was in a small town. So, like all those stories I told about girls putting their hands in my hair and the back of my head, like trying to memorize what my curl pattern was or accusing me of dyeing my hair to make it shinier. People in a big city, they're not paying attention that closely. They're not examining the moisture levels of my hair. Even that, the whole moisture level thing, the girl who compared her hair moisture to mine at work, that was when I was in a small town. So I feel like people paid more attention to the details of me when I was in a smaller city versus a larger city. But just because it didn't work for me, that doesn't mean it can't work for you. For some of you guys, you want to be visible. As a matter of fact, there's one girl that I know. She lives in a small town and she is a musician. She is able to be a professional musician in a small town just by doing gigs, and she plays the guitar and everything, and she goes to different bars. Like, she's a local artist. She might not have been able to make it in like LA or somewhere big. So she found a way to kind of thrive, and she wanted the visibility so she could have her music. So I think it depends on what kind of visibility you want. When it came to my person, like being viewed in person, I felt a little bit too visible. I also felt like one of the cons when I was in a small town was Karen culture. So don't get me wrong, I can be a Karen myself, okay? I've actually told my stories of me being a Karen. I call the police all the time on people. I the last time I called the police on somebody, it was probably a couple weeks ago. They were making too much noise in my neighborhood, and so I just called the police. So I am not saying that I'm not a Karen myself, but when I was working in a small town, um, I felt like the customer service, they have higher standards of like customer service because they get less business. They have less customers in general because there are just less people. And so I felt like more pressure to do a better job when I was in a small town, like in terms of promotions and stuff too. It's pretty much you work at the medical center, or you work at one of the tech companies, or you work at the insurance company. Like those were kind of the three big things to do in the small town I was living in. So if you happen to want to work in a different field, I feel like, you might have to move to a bigger city because some of the smaller towns, they only have certain types of jobs. And you know what? Some of you might not want to have a job at all. And by the way, that's where the cost of living comes in too, because if you live in an expensive state like California or New York, maybe you live in a smaller city, but your state itself is expensive. And so, your cost of living is still high. That's something to think about. But yeah, I just felt like the smaller town, it was a little bit more corporate. I felt like I had slightly less options. I couldn't really switch fields as easily. Like I couldn't switch careers as easily. It wasn't until I moved to a big city that I could completely switch careers and just like work and do something completely new. And I felt a little bit more pigeonholed at my job when I was in a smaller city. So, that's something to think about. As an exotical, people want to pigeonhole you. They wish that all you could do is be at the front desk. They want you to only be the receptionist or to only be one sort of thing. And so if you're kind of like me, where maybe you're multi passionate, by the way, that's an advantage, that's a privilege. Being multi passionate, being multifaceted. If you're more like that, I think a big city might work for you. But another con for me with being in a small city was in terms of creativity. Okay, so I feel like it helped my creativity because I had a lot of ideas. And part of it is because I was in a place where I was very quiet. It's quiet outside, there are no distractions. So I had more time to think. I had more time to come up with these creative ideas, but I couldn't always implement them because there's no space. There's not as much of a safe space for me to implement my creativity. So for example, I'm going to use fashion as an example. Let's say you like to dress super eclectic. So, like, I don't know, you wear big, chunky platform heels. Maybe you're goth or something, or you wear like big, fuzzy coats and like dramatic neon colors and stuff. When I was in a small town, if I dress like that, it's not really the norm. It's going to make me hyper visible. But if I'm walking around in New York and I'm wearing a big, giant, fuzzy pink coat, nobody cares. Nobody stops and asks me questions like, "Oh my God, like, what are you doing? Do you have an event you're going to?" When I was in a small town, people would ask me questions more like, "Are you going somewhere special? Do you have a special event or whatever?" I just felt like being dressed up was not the norm. And I'm not saying you can't dress up because you can, but I just remember when I wore my matching pink fitness set and I was going on a walk. And it was so funny, like just seeing people going on a walk outside. They were literally just wearing their pajamas, like literal pajama pants with flip flops and like a t shirt and just walking their dog for like 5 miles. So I feel like the fashion, in terms of fashion and stuff, and like, I don't know, kind of dressing for the occasion. If you're a very festive person, I feel like being in a small town it's not the same. It doesn't hit the same as like, let's say you're a festive person and you're in New York City and it's Christmas time. Okay, yeah, that it hits different because everywhere has lights. Everywhere has the red and green. You're going to see people walking around with a Christmas sweater on a random December day. So that's not necessarily the norm in the tiny town. So I feel like as an exotical, it's very important. You have to figure out how much you want to stand out because as an exotical, you already stand out. You stand out amongst the black community, you stand out amongst the non-black communities as well. So it's like your proximity to blackness makes you stand out, and then your proximity to racial ambiguity also makes you stand out. So that's already two different things that you've got going on right there. So now you have to decide, okay, in terms of identity, in terms of how I dress, what I do, what my routine is, how visible do I want to be? So everyone's going to have a different answer. But I also want to name some of my favorite places that I was in that were small. So I will admit, Maryland actually is one of my favorite places that was smaller. Same with North and South Carolina, as well as Louisiana. You guys know I'm obsessed with Louisiana. I'm obsessed with North Carolina. Those two places, that's my shit right there. That is my shit. Um, so those were some of the best experiences that I had being in a small place. But again, I will admit, I was not in a small ghetto or like somewhere where it's a high crime rate. When I say small town, I'm talking about, you know, those Christmas movies where they have people walking around in flannel or like they live on a farm. They have like horses and stuff. So like during Christmas time, that's where they get tourism. That's kind of what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about like being in the gutter because exoticals, you don't belong there. You know, let other people do that. Let that be other women's representation. That doesn't have to be your story. And if you came from that, that's fine. And if you like it, okay, but you don't have to stay there. But yeah, so I liked North Carolina, South Carolina. The people were very friendly towards me. It was very peaceful. The homeless people were more peaceful. So even if like I'm walking down the streets or something, it wasn't like people are literally following me. Like in a big city, literally the other day, somebody just tried to follow me into my car. Literally tried to follow me and went up to my window and everything. That would never happen in a small town. That it just wouldn't happen. The people are more to themselves, or the homeless people. They're more to themselves. You know, they just go off in the corner and like do their crack or whatever, and then just like sit by the trees, and then they just stand there, and that's it. And I feel like in the big cities, begging culture is more aggressive. So, you know, that's something to think about. But some other examples of small towns that I liked were small towns on islands. So, off the coasts of different islands. So, when I say islands, I'm talking about, you know, if you're Caribbean, um, different smaller towns, like I said, nicer, peaceful, smaller towns, and like Jamaica, in the Bahamas, Dominican Republic. Maybe you live in a small town like in Mexico for a couple months, or, you know, I mean, I have an audience from all over the world. So, kind of like think of island girl vibes, even like Hawaii. So not the main tourist islands, but kind of like the smaller towns, the smaller islands that are off the coast where, you know, just the locals live there. It's just slower paced, but it's also safe. And, you know, you just sit around, you just wear a flower in your hair. I loved Hawaii. Why did I not name Hawaii? Oh my God. The small towns in Hawaii, it's so beautiful. They literally just go surfing. Like I remember people were just going surfing. You had the girls, they just had their flowers in their hair. It literally looked like something out of a movie. And it was just so peaceful. There was nobody being aggressive. Nobody gave me a dirty look. And then the girls would just wrap up their I forgot what it's called. It's like a skirt that they wear on their bottom half. Is it like a sarong or something? I don't know. But they would just have their little skirts and they would wrap that up and just wear that. That was kind of like instead of wearing sweatpants, they would wear those skirts. They would just like braid each other's hair and then just get their food. You know, they had a little barber shop there so the men could go get their hair cut. And then they had the occasional person that lived over there because they were on the military bases or whatever. So I think that those places, those are some of my favorite memories. Those are some of my favorite small town moments that I can think of. Because just imagine like sitting by the water Or like that's your workout. That's your morning workout is literally going surfing or like swimming in the ocean or going running on the beach. That sounds like a very exotical coded lifestyle. So, if you are one of those girls who likes small towns, what are some of your favorite small towns? What are some of your favorite memories from small towns? Because those are some of my favorites. Just thinking about all the nice people, the wonderful food. There were no lines. Like in North Carolina and in South Carolina, I don't remember standing in a long line, not once. I don't remember going to restaurants and standing in long ass lines with like rude people and like rude waitresses trying to hurry up and like get their tip. And then they get mad when you don't tip them. No, I don't have any like negative memories like that when I think of South Carolina and North Carolina. So if you are an exotical who enjoys the small town, why do you enjoy it so much? What's your favorite part? So, like, also in my case, I liked going and walking to the Trader Joe's and, getting my stuff for my hair mask and making my own hair mask for several hours. And, like, that's the norm. I don't have as much FOMO when I'm in a small town. Um, well, at the time, I didn't have as much FOMO. So, but one thing I've learned though as I got older is I can't live my life based on FOMO because that's just ridiculous. That's very immature. I'm not trying to keep up with other people. I need to live my best life and I need to do what's best for me. So, now let's get into the big cities. So, if you're an exotical who's thinking about that, um, honestly, I love the big city lifestyle. One of my favorite things about the big city is guess what? It's sink or swim, baby. It is sink or swim. Either you eat or you get eaten up. And I actually love that. That's very inspiring to me. I don't know what it is in my personality where if you put me in a crazy situation, for some reason, I will rise to the occasion and I will like surprise myself at how well I handle it. Um, so there's something about being in a really big city that just pushes me. I will become a fucking machine. I don't know how to describe it, but I literally the times where I was waking up at 5 a.m., I remember waking up at 5 a.m. The stories I told about running 7 miles, I'm waking up hella early, running 7 miles, drinking a fruit smoothie, eating a perfect diet, all of that, that's in a big city. That's the big city shit. And then, like, doing my work or whatever, or being done with work by the early evening. And then I get to spend the rest of the evening reading books. I remember I read, was it 200? Somewhere around 200 books within 1 year. All of that happened in a big city. That was not some small town shit. I would never do that in a small town. I would be enjoying nature. That's what I love about small towns is I enjoy nature a lot more. When I'm in a big city, there is no nature. Like, what are you talking about? Bitch, you're in fucking Boston. What do you mean? Like, you're in New York City. What do you mean nature? I mean, they have like trees and stuff, but it's not the same as like living in a mountain town somewhere. So that's one of my favorite parts about the big city lifestyle is whatever you think you're good at, there's another level. There's another level. You have to rise up. It kind of sharpens me. Like in my case, it really sharpened me. It helped me to like be smarter and work smarter. And I'm so inspired. That's what I love about big cities. Okay, I'm editing right now and I had to pause it right here, but I was just thinking about how when I'm in a big city, there have been moments where I have been so inspired that I would literally tear up. So just imagine like being in DC and looking at the monuments, going to historical landmarks in Boston, or like going to places where the actual civil rights movement took place and like the people that you read about in books, they actually walked down the same streets that you're walking down. I had so many moments in big cities where I was tearing up because I was inspired, whereas in a small town, I felt like I had moments where I felt very inspired by nature. And I can't say that I've teared up, but in the small beach towns and stuff, I definitely would feel a sense of overwhelming peace and like happiness. So it's just two different things. You have to choose which one you are trying to be inspired by. I get so inspired just by looking at the lights. So in a small town, I'm inspired by nature, so the ocean, the mountains, the trees, whatever. And then in a big city, I'm inspired by the buildings, like all these tall buildings and like all these people who are also building something for themselves. So I noticed in big cities, I tend to hang out in the university areas a lot more. So just going to the university library and seeing all these books and just thinking, like, wow, somebody wrote each one of these books. Like, there are tens of thousands of people right now writing books. There are hundreds of thousands of people right now engineering buildings that are going to be built in the next year. Like, being in big cities, it kind of inspires me. It makes me think more about what humans are capable of and what I'm capable of. And so that's what I like. I feel like I'm very inspired. My level of ambition goes up. It's fast paced. I seem to thrive for whatever reason. I thrive on fast paced stuff and kind of like learning how to capture opportunities. Oh, that's another thing. I like all of the opportunities. I would never have been able to switch careers if I didn't go to a big city. I wouldn't have had a lot of the stories that I tell on my Patreon. Most of those stories are from big cities. All these crazy ass stories. People are like, oh, you're such a good storyteller. Well, no, it's not that I'm a good storyteller. It's that the story itself is very crazy sounding. And it's because it probably happened in a big city. So I think there's a lot of excitement. There's a lot of possibility. That's what I love about a big city. There's lots of possibility. But I think that one of the cons, though, that could also be a con because I remember I had a friend, both of us moved to a big city at the same time. And in my case, I thrived when it came to, because yes, you do deal with a lot more haters and stuff like that. It depends on what you're trying to do. But in my case, I have never experienced that much hate, as I did in a big city. Like in a big city, that was where I had people actively trying to sabotage me. Actually, for me, the big city was the first time where people actively tried to get violent with me and stuff. It wasn't in the small city. Because remember, big cities, you have people coming from every background who traveled from across the country or they immigrated from another country so they could live in New York or they could so you got a lot of people who are very, very desperate. There are people who are in survival mode. There's a huge gap between rich and poor that I noticed when I've been in big cities. So I think that for some people, that can cause them to get scared. Like the one girl that I knew, she ended up not wanting to stay there. She moved away basically. She moved back to a small city because she just didn't like it. She didn't like the hustle and bustle. She didn't like feeling like people were competing with her. So I never promote competition on my channel. I believe in real competition like the Olympics or the World Cup or whatever. Like that's a legit competition because you have like rules, you have like first, second, and third place. But when it comes to social competition, I don't promote that because there really are no rules. There's no way to really measure it. The way that I view it is I'm just competing with myself. I just want my life to be better today than it was yesterday. But just because I don't see other women as competition, that doesn't mean that they don't see me as their competition for something. So with my friend, she would get very discouraged. She actually became depressed because there were so many people talking shit about her and like trying to sabotage her or like being mean to her at work or putting false reports in at her job. And, so she kind of got worn down by that. I'm the exact opposite. I get energized by that. Like if people are hating on me or making videos about me, for example, on YouTube, like negative videos, that actually energizes me. I'm not going to report the video. I don't want the video to be taken down. I like using it as a sense of motivation and like fuel. But for some people, that's not fuel. It just wears them down. And then they just become discouraged or whatever. So I think depending on your personality type, like if you're more introverted or you don't like being around a lot of people, then you may not like the big city because people can be very vicious against you when they see you as being more privileged than that. There's a difference between being privileged in Fargo, North Dakota, and being privileged in Miami or privileged in New York. Think about it. Some girls would kill to be a Miami 10. They have all these videos right now. Oh, well, you're just not a Miami 10. Okay, so that's why you're complaining. That's why you're mad at the pretty girls in Miami. You're mad because not only is she pretty, but she is fucking Miami pretty. She is fucking New York City supermodel pretty. So that's a different level of jealousy trigger versus, being the most popular girl in Fargo, North Dakota. So I think one of the cons is kind of the viciousness that you might encounter. Or, I've heard some crazy stories about people getting maced or like getting their cars vandalized. And I mean, that really can happen anywhere. Um, but yeah, so in my case, I tend to get energized and fueled. And another thing I like about the big city is it's very easy for me to restart in a big city. Because guess what? The city is so big, you can't really hinder my career opportunities. Guess what? You wanted to give me a bad recommendation for being an accountant? Okay, well, bitch, I work for myself now. I'm a fucking content creator. Welcome to my life. I'm a content creator. There's more of an economy. I feel like in the bigger cities, a lot of them have a stronger economy. They have like different jobs, different sectors, because that's why it's a big city. That's why it's big. It's because the corporations there are big, the resources are big, the companies are big, they've got tourism there. So if worse comes to worse, bitch, I'll go work in a hotel. And I have. I actually have. When I was cleaning hotels, when I started off as a maid in a hotel, that was in a big city. I wouldn't have been able to do that probably in a small city. Because what? Nobody's going there. There are only one or two hotels. So it's not like a big city where they have hundreds of hotels that you could work at or clean at part time or whatever. So I feel like one of the pros for me with the big city is it really gets me into kind of like this hustle mindset, not slaving, not muling, because I'm not working to seek men's approval or to go 50-50 or do hypogamy or whatever. Or no, not muling. I'm not muling away so I could try to date some white guy or whatever. But I feel like in the big city, I can be who I want to be. I can reinvent myself very easily. I can switch careers more easily. There are also a lot of people that you encounter and you'll never see them again. That's what I love about the big city versus a small city. In a small city, it's like, oh shit, you're going to see your ex right there. Or, you're going to see people from your high school, or you might see like family members. Let's say your whole family lives in the small town. You're going to see your family. So even once you move out, you're still going to see them. You see them at the grocery store or whatever. But in a big city, there are a lot of people where it's like, I'm never going to see you again. Or if I quit a job, I'm never going to work that job again. I don't even have to work in that field again. I can create a whole new resume tomorrow with ChatGPT and get a whole new job. They're more desperate to fill jobs, I notice. Well, it's been a few years since I've worked though, so I don't know. But when I was working in the bigger cities, a lot of those companies, they were just desperate to have anybody to work there. So that's part of why I could get a job faster. It's because it's like there's more demand. There's more demand for people to work in that job. They need somebody. They need you more than you need them, for lack of better words. Versus when I was in the small town, I felt like a lot of people were fighting to work at the same, everybody wants to work at the oil rig. Everybody wants to work at the medical center. Everybody, versus a big city, it's like, no, there are hundreds of thousands of jobs within 5 square miles. As a matter of fact, the way that I got my accountant job, was this my, actually, no, I wasn't an accountant yet. But I worked in finance, and the way that I got my job working across the street, where it was like walking distance, that job was not even posted. Like it wasn't the top job on Indeed. That's how many jobs there were. That was in a big city. There were so many jobs available that when I searched on Indeed, that place didn't pop up. It was more so like whatever companies were the most desperate, they were paying to go up higher in the search results. So I had to specifically look up that exact place. I had to look up that exact building and then figure out what companies were in the building across the street from me. And then I had to go on the company website to try to apply for that job. And then I got the job. That's how I worked across the street. So that's some big city shit. I couldn't do that if I was living on a small island somewhere. I would have to take a boat every morning. I'd have to take the ferry. I'd have to, take the taxi boat to go in to town or whatever to work. So I think that was another advantage that I liked about the big cities. Also, I loved being invisible sometimes. And it's funny because You hear women with inferiority complexes, they'll be like, no, I just want to be seen. I finally want to be seen on the dating app. I'm going to change my race to white on the dating app so I can be more visible. I'm going to complain on TikTok so I can be more visible. I'm going to complain about beauty standards so that I can shame you into thinking I'm beautiful so I can be more visible. You have a lot of women fighting for visibility, but guess what? In a big city, I love to be invisible sometimes. I love to just be another face in the crowd. Sometimes I love to just go walk by myself at night, walking on the beach in a major city, like walking down the strip or whatever, walking along the strip in Vegas, walking down the streets of Miami. There are like tons of other people walking. Sometimes I love that. You guys know me, I love anonymity. I enjoy that. I like that people are so entrenched in their own lives, they're not paying as much attention to me. So, being in a big city, it's much easier actually for me. It's easier for me to move in silence when I'm in a big city because, people are less likely to even ask. They're less likely to really be studying you or like memorizing what you're doing. No, everybody's trying to like get their money. Everybody's trying to afford their rent or whatever. They're trying to make rent this month and all that. They're taking care of their kids, whatever. So they're not as focused on what I'm doing. So I feel like the biggest money moves that I've been able to make or the biggest level ups that I've ever had, for the most part, have been in kind of the bigger cities. Something else that I like is it's easier to jump in and out of blackness. Yeah, I said it. In a big city. So let's say you're multiracial. If you are black and Chinese, and then you live in a giant city that has a giant Chinatown or something, and like maybe the black girls are mean to you or you don't fit in the black community, okay, guess what? You can just move to Chinatown and just stay over there and just hang out with those people or whatever and learn and practice your Chinese and all that. So I enjoy that I literally get to pick and choose what culture I want to be a part of for that day. Like I actually talked about this on the Patreon how for 2026 I was prioritizing different types of friendships. So like prioritizing non-black friendships or like if you live in a small tiny town where everybody's black and that's your only option, that's it. Those are your friends. So you have to deal with the cultural flaws. But if you live in a major city that's very multicultural, you don't have to deal with the cultural flaws as much. You can just capture the benefits and then move on if there are no more benefits. Go where you're celebrated. Why is it that everybody else gets to go where they are celebrated, but suddenly, when it comes to exoticals, we're being colorist, texturist, or featurist when we want to be celebrated? And then people are saying, oh, we're trying to ride the coattails of white people or like we're tethering or whatever. And it's like, okay, but if she is a Caribbean exotical and there's a Caribbean community in her city, maybe she lives in a giant city like New York or something, and there are Caribbean people there, why not? If she wants to be in that culture, she can. Or if she's native, if she's Pacific Islander, if that's part of her background, and she decides that, that's where she wants to shop, that's where she wants to get her takeout, that's where she wants to join her workout groups. She wants to go to the gym in the Chinatown area or she wants to hang out with other cultures. That's another thing that I love about really big cities. Another thing, too, is people are always coming in and out. So, guess what? If there's a girl that I don't get along with, that bitch probably won't be able to afford to live here long term anyway. And I know it sounds fucked up, but it's like she can't even afford to live here. She's probably only going to last a couple years. Because I live in a city where I see a lot of bitches complaining on TikTok and they'll be like, oh, nobody's friendly there or I don't like it. That's why I said I'm not going to tolerate the hate. You just don't like that city because the city didn't like you. That's what it is. So in my case, I think one of the comforting things about being in a big city is there's always gentrification happening. There is always kind of like there will be new industries happening in that city. Jobs will come and go. So people are going to come and go. People are transient. They're much more transient in a place like New York. Like during the pandemic, a lot of people left New York. So if you're in a really, really big city, the people that are bothering you today, whether they're transplants or not, those people bothering you, they probably won't even be there tomorrow. They probably won't even be there next year. They probably won't even still live there 5 years from now. So I feel like I don't get annoyed as much because the crowd is always changing anyway. And then, there are going to be new people. Like in my city, summertime is where people move to my city the most. That's the moving season in my city. So, they warn us and they say, "Oh, this many tourists are coming," or like all the holiday weekends, they'll put out news articles and they'll say, just so you know, there are going to be 50,000 extra people here this weekend for XYZ. Like there's always something going on, new people moving here and moving out and staying for 6 months so they can work and then they leave or they go back to where they came from. And so that's actually kind of comforting for me in a way because it's like, even if somebody gets on my nerves, I know deep down inside that person probably won't last here anyway. So, like I'm not one of those people that encourages others to move to my city. And I can't say where I live because of privacy, but it's like, I wouldn't want, even if I was public on this channel, even if I showed myself, I don't want you to come to where I live. Why would I promote where I live? No, don't live where I live. Go somewhere else. Please get out. Like the people that complain about Miami and they say, "Oh, well, Miami's racist and colorist." Okay, then bye, bitch. Don't let the door hit you on the way out. You think the people in Miami are going to be begging for you to come back? You think the people at the club and the people on these yachts and everything, they're going to be begging for Keisha to come back and get on their yacht? No, they're not. They're going to say, "Goodbye. You got chewed up and spit out." Okay, so get on a plane and go back to whatever city you're from then. So I think a lot of people they go to a big city expecting a certain lifestyle. But what I've learned is I am the boss. I'm the boss of my life. If my life sucks, that's on me. If my life is good, that's on me. So I'm the one that is deciding what I'm doing day to day. And then they'll be like, "Oh, well, my job sucks." Okay, so why are you working that job? Get a new job. Do a side hustle or whatever. Or like I told you guys, I would rather be a freaking waitress and be respected than to work in a corporate job and be disrespected and abused. So, for some women, they are willing to take the abuse though. They're willing to deal with the Karens every day. I'm not. So I think that some people are just not self-aware and they don't understand what is a depression trigger for them. For me, being in a bad work environment, that would be a depression trigger. It's not the job title itself that's a depression trigger for me because I don't put job titles on a hierarchy. Bitch, I've been a fucking barista. I have been a maid cleaning apartments. I have babysat, been a babysitter before. So I don't put it on a hierarchy. So if I'm babysitting or walking a dog, nobody's going to be able to make fun of me and be like, "Ha ha, you're babysitting." Like, who cares? I don't care enough. That's not enough to make me depressed. But what would make me depressed is working some big job where maybe I'm getting paid a lot more, but I'm mentally unhealthy. So I think a lot of women, they talk about decentering men, and you should decenter men, but for some people, they also need to decenter that job, or they need to decenter their manager, or decenter the city they live in, or, like in my case, my mental health comes first, not my job title, not my relationship title or relationship status. My mental health comes first, my geographical location. That's also one of the main things that I center my life around. But I know that that's rare. Most people don't have a dream city. I happen to be someone who does care about the city I live in. So, if you're like me and maybe you do care, then that means you should start saving up the money or leave with nothing. Why are you so scared? Some people are too scared. They're scary ass bitches. That's their problem. You're scared to be broke because you feel like you're going to stay broke or whatever. You're scared to sell everything and move. You're scared to sell everything and leave that guy or whatever because you think you're going to fail. I don't look at myself like that. I actually believe in myself. So yes, I have moved before with no money, or I just had the money to like pay for the apartment and stuff. And then, and that's it. Then I figure it out from there. But that's because I believe in myself and I trust myself. So I think for a lot of Dustishas, their lives are dusty because they are a dusty. She doesn't even know how to keep a promise to herself. So it's like, yeah, of course she wasn't going to make it in Miami. Of course she wasn't going to make it in New York or Atlanta or Boston or whatever. She wasn't going to make it anywhere. She's a Dustisha. She doesn't even know how to say no to a cookie. She doesn't even know how to eat healthy. She doesn't even know how to get her skin clear or grow her edges out. She doesn't even know how to be sexually disciplined and how to wait for somebody who's actually worth her time. So she's dusty. So, of course, everywhere she goes, the dust is going to follow. And that's why no matter what city you live in, whether it's a big city or a small city, you're always going to see dustishas complaining about that city. And then if you follow these TikTokers, they'll be like, oh, I hated Atlanta, so I moved to New York. And then 6 months later, what's she going to do? She's going to complain about New York. And then she's going to move to Miami. Oh, I love Miami. Oh, just kidding. I hate it here. And it's like, yeah, because you are a dustisha. Everywhere you go, the dust follows you. You find the dustiest people of Miami. You found the dustiest people in Atlanta or New York. And then you want to blame the city when it's not the city's fault. A geographical location does not control you. So whether you're in a small town or a big town, you don't have to be defined by your town. So I think a lot of women who they complain about certain cities, or if they worship certain cities and put cities on a pedestal, it's the same thing. It's kind of like this external locus of control. Oh, all my problems will be solved if I just move to LA. No, LA is not your God. Atlanta is not your God. So I don't even view my city like that either. Like, oh, if I just move here or if I just live in this place, all my problems will be solved. No, nobody's life is perfect. But for exoticals, I just feel like you have to decide what type of people do you want to be around? What ethnicity? You want to be around a lot of black people? Do you like being around white people? Whatever. What percentage? Like I broke it down to the actual percentage. What percentage of black, white, Asian, Hispanic, etc.? What percentage do I want to be around? 50% white? Okay, so look up cities that are 50% white. What climate do I want to be in? That's another thing that determined where I wanted to live. Okay, how many sunny days do I want? Do I want at least 200 sunny days per year? Yes, I literally broke it down like that much. Like, okay, I want at least 200 days of sun per year, or I want 150 days of sun per year. Do I want snow? Do I want, what cost of living? How much can I afford in terms of rent or mortgage? And then for transportation, like part of why I decided to move is because I wanted to be somewhere where I had access to public transportation. So just in case something happened where I didn't have a car or whatever, at least I could go on the public transportation and feel safe. So all of those things are kind of like social strategies that have helped me. And then it's like, if you could think of the perfect day in your city, what would that look like? So for me, it just popped up in my head, me walking down the trail with an iced coffee. So, that's maybe I could go to a city where they have really cute coffee shops. Every city does not have cute coffee shops. For those of you who care about dating, where does your type live? For those of you who care about dating guys who are rich or whatever, or only being around wealthy or affluent men, where do those guys live? Because they probably don't live in the ratchet side of Chicago. Also, in terms of pretty privilege, because I know that the exoticals have pretty privilege, whether you think you're pretty or not, you have pretty privilege due to your racial background and phenotype. Because, unfortunately, colorism, texturism, and featureism exist. So people are going to pedestalize your looks. So you already have pretty privilege. But I see people saying that in bigger cities that people generally kind of look better versus smaller cities. Well, yeah, because a lot of big cities that cost more money. So usually people who have more money, they tend to spend more money on looking good. So that's one reason why you might feel like people in Miami look super good or whatever, or people in New York look so good. Well, yeah, because it's just a place where people have access to doing that. Go to Colombia, go to like other countries and stuff too. Go to the big cities there and you'll see the same phenomenon. Even in countries where they're not as wealthy as the US, if you go to the big cities in those countries, kind of the glamorized cities, the women are going to be very pretty. So I think that's a factor, so if you're an exotical who likes glamour and you like to be super put together and be super dressed up all the time, then you should be fine if you're in a big city. And then on the other hand, if you're an exotical who likes to stay casual, you like wearing sweats every day, you like wearing sweats to work. When I was in a small town, one of the jobs that I had, it was a cubicle job. They let us wear whatever we want. Like we could dress casual to work. We could wear sweats, we could wear hoodies, anything we wanted, we could wear that in the office. So for some people, they like a casual culture of a small town, and then other people they like, wearing the high heels and all that. So I think that's one difference in terms of the pretty privilege. Also, there are more people in the big cities, so I think sometimes women try to do more so they can stand out. So again, you're not competing with them. It's more so they're kind of competing with you. Because when I used to go walking on my favorite trail, I was in a big city, and I remember even on the walking trail, I literally felt underdressed, which is crazy. I'm like, how am I underdressed? And I'm on a freaking hiking trail. Like, this is crazy. And I was wearing a cute outfit. I was wearing an olive green crop top, and I had like some army pants. They were like army design, that army fatigue, but they were leggings. So my outfit matched from head to toe, but I just, I was not looking glamorous or anything. So I was walking down the street. My hair was just basic. I had no makeup on, just like a low bun, whatever. And all the other girls, they were wearing like a very cute matching set from head to toe, or like the one strap. I don't know, the super cute bras with like the cross back and like all these fancy ones. Well, that's because it's just the culture of a big city. People have a little bit more money, or they feel like they want to be seen a little bit more. And, on that trail, actually, I learned as I lived there, I learned that a lot of the girls were trying to be cute because the men who walked on that trail, that was like in an affluent area. And sometimes the guys would be walking their dogs or whatever, and then they'll try to stop you and hit on you. And, and I didn't learn that until it happened to me. But because the guys were not my type, they were more like kind of these yuppie white boys or whatever. So that it just happens to not be my type. But once it started happening to me, then I realized, oh, that's why people are trying to be cute. This is more than just a hiking trail. This is an entire social hub. This trail is a social hub. And also on the corners of that trail, so the trail would go all through the city. So it wasn't all like hiking with like trees and stuff. Part of it would go through the streets of the city. And so then you could kind of like walk off onto the bars and stuff. It was so cute. So I could see why some people would dress up, because you're in your cute fitness set, and then you can just walk a mile, and then you can just go off to the side and go to the bar, get a drink with your friends or whatever, and then continue your walk. So I think there's a different pretty privileged culture. Generally speaking, I've noticed that the bigger cities, they tend to have more glamour. So when I say glamour, what I'm talking about is just any sort of beauty enhancements. So that's where you're going to see more surgeries, more BBLs, more fillers, and I don't know, nose jobs, whatever, extensions. That's more like enhancements. By the way, I'm not against enhancements. Um, I don't like tell you to get enhancements, but I'll never tell you not to get enhancements, because that's what the Dustishas want. They want you to feel like you can only be beautiful in one way. So I always promote freedom within your beauty standard. So however you want to look, that's how you should look. So in my case, moving from a small town, my standard of beauty when I was on the trail, my beauty standard was just the olive green top with the army pants and the low bun, whatever. But other women, they had a different standard, and that's okay. One's not better than the other. They just serve different purposes. And so in the bigger cities, they do kind of, they don't pedestalize. I don't like saying that they pedestalize enhancements, because that's actually a stereotype. That's not true. Everybody doesn't want a BBL or whatever. It's not like, oh, you're fugly if you don't have a BBL. It's more so that in bigger cities, they do have a lot of events going on. They do have a lot of opportunities. There probably are more girls who do OF, or they do Instagram modeling, or they're like, I don't know, some sort of rapper's girlfriend. Who knows? Like, there are just more of a variety of jobs, and there's a variety of social strategies that women are using in regards to their beauty. And so I think that for some of the other girls, they just don't understand that. They've never been around a diverse beauty culture. They've only been around the beach type of beauty, beauty on the beach, just wearing your hair curly or wavy, having a flower in your hair, kind of like how I talked about with Hawaii, being on these small islands and stuff. They're all just wearing their hair in a braid, just one braid down their back, no products, no sleek edges, flower in their hair. They've got the sarong on. That's going to be different than going to New York City or even Miami. But I think another thing too, in terms of the pretty privilege, I was taking more pictures in a big city versus in a small town because in the big city they have more events where it's kind of like formal. Even at your jobs too, in big cities they do kind of expect you to be more put together. I never had a job where I could wear a hoodie sweatshirt. Not in a big city. In a small town, yeah, you could wear hoodies and stuff because nobody really sees you. But I think that's another part of big city culture. You're more in public, for lack of better words. You're being seen every single day. You're being seen by thousands of people. So I just think there's a different mindset around networking as well. Like, once I moved to a big city, that was where I learned, like, you never know who you could meet. You could meet someone walking down the street. You could meet someone who gives you an opportunity, or they give you a job or something, and you're just walking. And because they like your outfit, now you've got a job. And that actually happened to me before. So, but to be fair though, I was at a job fair. So it wasn't like every time I walked down the street, somebody offered me a job. But I have had instances where my outfit contributed to me getting a job, but that was more so with the big city culture versus being in a super tiny town or being on a small island. I think that when I was in a smaller town, personality privilege worked more to my advantage because people are getting to know you more, they value who you are, they kind of have more time to get to know you. And I felt like in a big city it was more so just like snap judgments, snap stereotypes. And that could work in your favor though, because as an exotical you're stereotyped as privileged, you're stereotyped as having opportunities, you're stereotyped as being a status symbol because most people want to date you or create you. So that also works to your advantage, which is why people talk shit about Miami and then they say, I don't meet the Miami beauty standard, or I don't meet the, LA beauty standard. And then it's like, well, what is the beauty standard that you're talking about? Usually it's some sort of exotical. It's somebody who benefits from colorism, texturism, or featureism. And then they'll be like, oh, she's the one who always gets chosen. So that's another thing to think about. What stereotypes do you want to benefit from? And then, what stereotypes are you trying to avoid? What's your hater archetype? Where does your hater archetype live? What state is your hater archetype in? Like, I already know some of you guys are going to not like Louisiana, for example. You're going to get mad because maybe you don't like Southern black culture, or, you feel like Louisiana has too many black people or whatever. So different people have different hater archetypes. They have different cultures that they thrive in. um, what culture gives you a pedestal? What ethnicity? What geographical location do you feel like you get a good pedestal in? So, for example, I love beach towns and beach cities and islands. You know why? Because I have the body. I have a beach body. I like being in a swimsuit. Even if I'm bloated or whatever, I'm still bikini ready. So I can see why a lot of obese women hate Miami. Well, yeah, I would hate Miami too if I were obese. Imagine living next to a beach. You see people in bikinis all day long and then you can't go, or like, you're sweating just by walking around. You're about to start a fire with your thighs because your thighs are rubbing together so fast. You're over here sweating. You're dripping in sweat when you're walking down the strip and everything. So, yeah, I would hate Miami too if I were obese. I would hate LA too if I'm ugly and I don't look like an actress or a model. Yeah, of course. I would hate New York too if I'm poor. I would hate LA and Beverly Hills and Calabasas if I'm too broke to live there. Of course, I'm not going to like living in a white area if I feel like I don't fit in, or I've never had any friends who are white, or I've never had friends who are lighter than me. All my friends are only dark skinned and black and whatever. So I think that's something that the exoticals should look at is look at who's talking. What does she look like? Does she look like you? Because that's another thing. I don't usually see women of my phenotype. Women who look like me, they have my body type. Their hair looks like mine, their face looks like mine, their pretty privilege looks like mine, and then they're complaining on TikTok about, oh, I hate Miami, I hate DC, I hate Boston. I don't really see that. Usually it's women whose phenotypes are different than mine. And that's no shade, I'm just like saying an observation. But what do you ladies think? Let me know in the comment section and I'll talk to you next time. Stay pretty, ladies.